Imagine reaching 68 years old, surrounded by overdue bills, a leaky roof, and the feeling that dreams have been left behind. But what if everything could change in an unexpected way? In this heartwarming story, you will see how Margaret, an elderly woman facing challenges, found hope where she least expected it, and made a turnaround that will warm your heart. Get ready for intense moments, surprises, and a lesson that could transform your life. Before we start, please like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories that prove it's never too late to start over. My name is Margaret, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I would be here to tell this story. On that cold January morning, as I watched the raindrops trickling down the window of my small house, I felt the weight of every decision I needed to make. "Mrs. Margaret, here's another notification from the bank," said the mailman Pedro, with that compassionate look I knew all too well. "Thank you, dear," I replied, trying to keep a smile on my face, even knowing it was another bill I wouldn't be able to pay. I walked inside and sat in the old armchair inherited from my mother, one of the few pieces of furniture I still kept in good condition. The silence was broken only by the ticking of the wall clock and the sound of the incessant drip from a leak into a basin in the corner of the room. "My God, how did we get to this point?" I murmured to myself as I opened the drawer of the desk. There lay the reality I had been trying so hard to ignore, a pile of overdue bills, all organized by due date, a habit I had maintained for years, even without being able to pay them. That afternoon, my neighbor Ruth knocked on the door. "Margaret, I came to see how you are. I haven't seen you at the little market for days." "Oh, Ruth, it's tough," I confessed, pouring a weak coffee, the last I had in the cupboard. "The pension isn't enough anymore. This week I had to choose between buying heart medication or paying the electricity bill." "And what did you choose?" Ruth asked, concerned. "The medication, of course. But now I'm afraid they'll cut off the power," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. "You know, Ruth, sometimes I wonder if I worked so hard my whole life just to end up like this." The sound of the rain increased outside, and with it, my anxiety. The cracks in the walls seemed to grow every day, just like my worries. The little calendar on the wall marked only the beginning of the month, and I had nowhere left to run. "Margaret, have you ever thought about asking your kids for help?" Ruth suggested. "I can't, Ruth. They can barely support their own families. How can I add more weight on their shoulders?" At that moment, I looked at the photo of my grandchildren on the wall, their innocent smiles contrasting with the harsh reality I lived. A stubborn tear rolled down my face as I wondered if there was still hope for change at 68. "Sometimes I feel invisible," I confessed to Ruth. "As if the world has moved on and I have been left behind, trapped in this endless cycle of bills and worries." Ruth held my hand tenderly, but even she didn't know that day would mark the beginning of a transformation I could never have imagined. It was a Sunday afternoon when my granddaughter Julia showed up unannounced, carrying a radiant smile and a small gift bag. "Grandma, I brought something special for you," she said, practically bouncing with excitement. "But it's not my birthday, dear," I replied, adjusting my glasses as she sat down next to me on the sofa. "I know, Grandma. But after seeing you so worried at the family lunch last week, I couldn't stop thinking about how to help," Julia explained, pulling a small book from the bag. "The title is The Power of Visualization. It changed my life, and I'm sure it can help you too." I confess that my first reaction was disbelief. "Oh, Julia, these modern things aren't for me. At my age, we already know that life is tough." "Stop it, Grandma," she insisted, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "You won't believe it, but after I started practicing what's in here, I got that job I wanted so much. And there were over 200 candidates." As Julia spoke, I noticed something different about her. It wasn't just youthful excitement, there was a deep conviction in her words. Explain it better to me, my dear. What do you mean by visualizations? It's like a movie we create in our heads, Grandma. We imagine what we want as if it has already happened. We feel the emotion, the gratitude. It's like a prayer, but with images. After Julia left, I was alone with that mysterious book. The night's silence was broken only by the ticking of the clock when I decided to give those pages a chance. What nonsense, I initially thought. But something made me keep reading. Among the stories of people who had transformed their lives, one phrase jumped out at me: the universe responds to the clarity of your desires. Visualize, feel, and believe. That night, before going to sleep, I found myself imagining what it would be like to have a life free of financial worries. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to dream again. What do I have to lose? I whispered to myself, closing the book. On the wall, the photo of my grandchildren seemed to smile in approval. I took my old notebook and wrote on the first page, "Today, January 15th, I decide to give a chance to the impossible." It felt strange, but I sensed a small spark of hope ignite within me. Julia was right, there was something different about that book, something that went beyond the printed words. It was as if each page whispered, "It's never too late to start over." That morning, I looked at the book on the table and felt a tightness in my chest. An annoying drip was falling right in the middle of the room, making a sound that seemed to mock my recent dreams. "What nonsense," I murmured, grabbing another bucket to catch the falling water. The phone rang. It was my friend Maria. "So, Margaret? How's that visualization thing your granddaughter taught you going?" "Oh, Maria, honestly? I feel like a fool. I sit here with my eyes closed, imagining money falling from the sky while my ceiling is literally collapsing," I vented, feeling tears welling up in the corners of my eyes. "But are you doing it right?" "Every day?" she asked, genuinely interested. "I try, but then the electricity bill comes, the overdue rent, and all I can visualize are more problems," I confessed, moving another bucket a few inches to the left. After hanging up, I sat in my old armchair and closed my eyes. "Visualize abundance," the book said. But how could I visualize abundance when all I saw were shortages? That night, while trying to sleep with the sound of dripping as background music, an old memory surfaced, me, very young, learning to sew. How many times had I pricked my finger? How many crooked seams had I undone? But I never gave up. "Do you need a plumber?" asked Mr. Jose, the neighbor, the next morning. "I can't afford it right now, Mr. Jose," I replied, embarrassed. "But who said anything about paying? You've always taken care of my kids when I needed it. It's time to give back." That gesture of kindness made me stop and think. Maybe the universe didn't work only with money. Maybe there were other forms of abundance that I wasn't seeing. "Every day is a struggle," I wrote in my journal that night. But every struggle has its purpose. Even if I don't fully believe that yet, I'll keep trying. After all, what else do I have left? And so, amid doubts and small moments of hope, I continued. Sometimes I caught myself smiling at the thought of a different life, other times, I cried out of frustration. But something inside me, a stubborn and persistent voice, whispered, "Don't give up yet, Margaret. Your story is far from over." I was sitting on a park bench, feeding the pigeons, when I heard a familiar voice, "Margaret? I can't believe it. It's been so long." It was Donna Gloria, my old neighbor. But there was something different about her, a special sparkle in her eyes, a more elegant posture. Gloria! Wow, you look radiant. What happened? She sat down beside me, grinning from ear to ear. You know, Margaret, 6 months ago I was just like you are now, worried, downcast. But I discovered something that completely changed my life. What? I asked, curious about her visible transformation. You're going to think it's silly, but I discovered the power of creative visualization, she said, pulling out a small notebook from her bag. Every day, before sleeping and upon waking, I dedicate 15 minutes to it. But how does it work exactly? I questioned, remembering the book Julia had given me. Come on, close your eyes with me, she requested, holding my hands. Now, imagine your house. Not as it is, but as you would like it to be. Feel the smell of fresh paint on the walls, see the sunlight coming through the new windows. Following her instructions, I created the mental image. It felt so real that I could almost touch it. Now, the most important part, Gloria continued, think as if it has already happened. Say, thank you for my beautiful, renewed home. Thank you for my beautiful, renewed home, I repeated, feeling a shiver run down my spine. Do this every day, Margaret. In the morning and at night. And write everything in this notebook, she said, handing me a new notebook. Write your dreams as if they were headlines from a future newspaper. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened the notebook. On the first page, I wrote, Gratitude, March 15th, my house is completely renovated. The walls are painted, the ceiling no longer leaks, and every room breathes peace and harmony. It felt strange to thank for something that hadn't happened yet, but there was a different feeling in it. As if, by writing those words, I were planting seeds in the garden of the universe. It's just the beginning, I whispered to myself, looking at the notebook with a mix of hope and determination. One day at a time, one visualization at a time. Ma'am, congratulations. You are our 1,000th customer of the day, said the cashier at the supermarket, smiling. You've won a complete food basket. I froze, staring at the basket full of products. The night before, I had visualized my pantry full. Coincidence? But, are you sure? I asked, still incredulous. Of course. And look, it even has that coffee you always buy when it's on sale. I returned home carrying the basket, my heart racing. That night, while making my notes in the notebook Donna Gloria gave me, I wrote trembling, is this really working? 2 days later, my phone rang. Ms. Margaret Santos, a formal voice asked. Yes, that's me. This is from the Benefits Department. We identified an error in your 2019 process. You are entitled to a retroactive amount of $3,750. My legs went weak. I had to sit down. What do you mean? Are you sure? Absolutely. The deposit will be made within 48 hours. After hanging up, I rushed to my room and grabbed my notebook. There it was, written 2 weeks ago. I am grateful for the money that comes to me in unexpected ways. I called Julia immediately. Grandma? Did something happen? Julia, you won't believe it. Remember those visualizations? It's happening, my daughter. First the basket at the supermarket, now this money. See, Grandma? I told you. You're reaping what you sowed with your positive thoughts. That night, I sat in my old armchair and cried. But these were different tears, tears of gratitude, tears of renewed hope. Dear Diary, I wrote, today I understood that miracles exist. They start small, like seeds, but they grow when we water them with faith and gratitude. For the first time in years, I no longer feel alone in this struggle. It's as if the universe is conspiring in my favor. I looked up at the ceiling, still with some stains from leaks, but now with new eyes. Soon, I thought, you will also be transformed. And for the first time, that idea no longer seemed impossible. I picked up my notebook and began to visualize the next steps. Now, with concrete proof that something was changing, my faith had gained new wings. The phone rang on a Thursday morning. It was my lawyer, Dr. Pedro. "Mrs. Margaret, please sit down. I need to give you some news." My heart raced. "Did something bad happen, doctor?" On the contrary, he replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Do you remember that lawsuit regarding your father's house? The one that had been stalled for 15 years? How could I forget? It was a property my father had left behind, but it was in dispute with a distant cousin. We won, Mrs. Margaret. And that's not all. With the appreciation of the property and the interest, you are entitled to $175,000. I dropped the phone. Julia, who was passing through the room, ran to me. "Grandma? What happened?" I couldn't speak. I just pointed to the visualization notebook on the table. Julia opened it and read aloud, "I am grateful for the resolution of my grandfather's lawsuit, which brings me abundance and peace." "My daughter," I finally managed to say, "it happened. Everything we visualized happened." That afternoon, sitting on the bench in the square where I used to meet Mrs. Gloria, I reflected on my journey. It wasn't just about the money. It was about how I had changed inside. "Are you okay, ma'am?" asked a lady passing by. "I'm great," I replied, smiling. "In fact, I've never been better." At home, I opened my journal one last time. "Dear Diary, today I understood that the true miracle was not the money. It was discovering my own strength. 3 months ago, I was a woman who could barely look to the future. Today, I am someone who knows my worth, who understands that I deserve good things. It is not the circumstances that define who we are, but rather our ability to believe and persist. The universe did not change, I changed. And that is the greatest manifestation of all." I looked out the window, watching the sun set. Tomorrow, I would start the renovation of the house. But the biggest renovation had already happened, the renovation of my soul. And that, no amount of money could buy. "Thank you," I whispered to the universe, knowing that now it was just the beginning of a new story. 6 months passed. Today, sitting on my renovated porch, having my breakfast, I look at the garden I planted and smile as I see the roots blooming. "Grandma, I brought that cake you love." Julia enters excitedly, carrying a box. "Come here, my daughter. Sit with me for a little bit." As we savor the cake, Julia looks around. It's amazing how everything has changed, right? Not just the house. "You know, Julia," I say, holding her hand, "the other day a neighbor asked me what my secret was. How I managed to turn my life around at 68. And what did you say?" I said that the secret isn't in age, but in the courage to believe. Many people think it's too late to start over, that dreams have an expiration date. But they don't. At that moment, the doorbell rings. It's Mrs. Gloria, coming for our weekly coffee. "Margaret! This house looks beautiful. And you, that sparkle in your eyes, gets stronger every day." "You know, Gloria," I reply, pouring another cup of coffee. The other day I was thinking, what if I hadn't met you that day in the park? What if I had ignored your advice? But you didn't ignore it, she smiles. Because you were ready to change. Julia stands up excitedly. Grandma, tell Mrs. Gloria about the support group you started. Support group? Gloria asks, curious. Yes, I reply, emotional. Every Saturday, I gather some people here at my house. We share stories, fears, dreams. I teach the visualization techniques I learned. It's my way of giving back to the universe. And how many people have you helped? I don't like to think of it that way, I reply, looking at the blue sky. I just share my story. Each one finds their own path. But seeing the eyes of people shine when they realize they can change too, that is priceless. I stand up, walk to the garden, and touch a newly opened roof. You know what I learned? That we are like these roots. We need the right moment to bloom. Sometimes a storm makes us think we will never bloom again. But all it takes is a ray of sunshine, a little faith, and we start to grow again. And you, I say, looking directly at you who are listening to this now, what storm are you facing? What dream is tucked away in the depths of your heart, waiting to bloom? Don't wait any longer. Your moment is now. Believe, visualize, give thanks. The universe is waiting for your first step. If Margaret's story inspired you, imagine what you can achieve with faith and determination. Don't forget to like this video to help share this powerful message. In the comments, tell us how you believe small changes can transform lives. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories and hit the bell to not miss any content. Your participation makes all the difference and helps spread hope to those who need it most. Let's continue to believe in the impossible together.